Commander Vex stared at the human sitting across from him in the interrogation chamber, trying not to let his three eyes twitch in annoyance. Captain Maya Torres sat there with her arms crossed, looking about as interested as someone watching paint dry on a hull breach. No datapad, no recording device, not even a stylus in sight. Captain Torres, Vex began, his voice carrying that special tone reserved for dealing with particularly dense cadets. This is a formal debrief regarding the incident at Station Omega-7. Standard protocol requires documentation of all testimonies. Maya shrugged, a gesture that made Vex's antennae quiver with frustration. Sure thing, bug boy. Fire away. The Zephyrian commander's mandibles clicked together sharply. Bug boy. Honestly, these humans had no sense of proper military respect. Where are your recording implements, Captain? Don't need them, Maya replied, examining her fingernails with theatrical interest. You see, Commander Vex, you're basically teaching my debrief reports right now. I wrote half of what you're about to ask me about. Lieutenant Cora, Vex's aide, leaned forward from her position near the wall. The Atlantean's gills fluttered nervously as she spoke. Commander, perhaps the human doesn't understand the severity of what happened at Omega-7. 17 different species were involved, 3 diplomatic incidents occurred, and somehow she paused, checking her datapad. Somehow she single-handedly prevented what our analysts are calling the potential start of the Fourth Galactic War. Maya looked up from her nails, raising an eyebrow. 17 species, huh? I counted 19, but who's keeping track? Vex's third eye twitched. 19? Our sensors detected only. Your sensors, Maya interrupted with a grin that showed too many teeth for Vex's comfort. Missed the Phantom Fleet representatives hiding in the ventilation system and the Hive Queen's personal scouts masquerading as maintenance drones. But hey, who am I to question superior alien technology? The silence in the room stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Lieutenant Cora's datapad slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor with a sound that seemed to echo forever. The Phantom Fleet was there, Vex whispered, his voice barely above a breath. Maya leaned back in her chair, the picture of casual confidence. Oh, that's just the beginning, Commander. You want to know what really happened at Omega-7? Buckle up, because your little diplomatic incident was actually an attempted hostile takeover of the entire sector. And yes, before you ask, I have receipts. Vex exchanged a look with Cora that spoke volumes. The Phantom Fleet hadn't been seen in over 2 cycles, and the Hive Queen, well, nobody had successfully detected her scouts. Ever. Never. The fact that a human had not only spotted them, but apparently dealt with whatever they were planning was either the most impressive intelligence work he'd ever encountered or the most elaborate lie in galactic history. Captain Torres, Vex said slowly, perhaps you should start from the beginning. Finally, Maya said, stretching like a cat who'd just caught the prize canary. I was wondering when you'd get around to asking the right questions. So there I was, enjoying what was supposed to be a routine supply run to Omega-7, when I noticed something interesting about the station's power consumption patterns. Power consumption patterns. Cora had retrieved her datapad and was frantically taking notes now. Yeah, see, most beings don't pay attention to the little details. But humans? We're nosy by nature. I noticed the station was drawing about 30% more power than it should have been for its listed operations. That got me curious. Vex leaned forward despite himself. And curiosity might have killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back, Maya said with another one of those unsettling grins. Turns out someone had been slowly siphoning power to run a rather sophisticated jamming array, the kind designed to block long-range communications and, more importantly, distress signals. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Cora's gills had stopped fluttering entirely, a sure sign of extreme stress in Atlanteans. Who? Vex asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer would complicate his life exponentially. Well, That's where it gets fun, Maya said, and Vex noted that her definition of fun probably differed significantly from his own. The syndicate had planted operatives throughout the station's crew. Not just a few low-level saboteurs, mind you. We're talking about a coordinated infiltration that had been in progress for over 8 months. The Hegemony Syndicate, Cora squeaked. But they were disbanded after the Treaty of Proxima. Maya laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both musical and terrifying. Oh, sweet summer child, the syndicate wasn't disbanded. They just got better at paperwork. Official dissolution, my left boot. They've been rebuilding their power base through legitimate business acquisitions and strategic political marriages. Very clever, really. I almost admire the audacity. Vex felt a headache forming behind his primary eye. Captain, are you telling us that the syndicate has been operating under the noses of the Galactic Council for the past 3 years? Not just operating, Commander. Thriving. They've got assets in at least 40 different systems, and Omega-7 was supposed to be their big coming-out party. Complete with the hostile takeover of one of the most strategically important trading stations in this sector. The pieces were starting to fall into place in Vex's mind, and he didn't like the picture they were forming. And the diplomatic meetings, or a cover, Maya finished. Get all the major players in one place, cut off their communications, and then present them with a fait accompli. Join the new syndicate order, or find yourself on the wrong side of a very nasty war. But the meetings went smoothly, Cora protested. All reports indicated successful negotiations. Maya's grin turned positively predatory. That's because I may have made a few adjustments to their plans. Vex was almost afraid to ask, but his duty as an intelligence officer demanded it. What kind of adjustments? Well, first I had to deal with the Phantom Fleet representatives. Tricky bunch, those. They were supposed to provide the military muscle for the operation, but they have this annoying habit of being invisible to most sensor arrays. How did you even know they were there? Cora asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Heat signatures, Maya said simply. Phantom ships might be invisible to electromagnetic sensors, but they still generate heat. And human thermal imaging technology is, well, let's just say we've had to get creative about spotting things that don't want to be spotted. Vex nodded slowly. Human paranoia was legendary throughout the galaxy, but apparently it had practical applications. So you found them. Then what? Then I had a little chat with their commander. Very reasonable fellow, once you get past the whole mysterious space phantom thing. Turns out the syndicate had been feeding them some creative interpretations of the truth about the operation's objectives. You spoke with them? Vex's voice cracked slightly. Phantom Fleet commanders don't speak with outsiders. Dever. They do when you're holding evidence that their syndicate employers have been planning to double-cross them, Maya said cheerfully. Amazing how chatty people become when you show them documented proof that they're being set up as fall guys for what was essentially a war crime. The silence that followed was so complete that Vex could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his auditory chambers. You had proof? He finally managed. Commander, I didn't just have proof. I had video recordings, financial records, communication logs, and a very detailed timeline of exactly how the syndicate planned to blame the entire operation on Phantom Fleet piracy once they had control of the station. Maya reached into her jacket and pulled out a small data crystal, placing it on the table between them. The innocent-looking device seemed to glow with malevolent potential. Everything's on there, including the part where syndicate leadership explicitly discussed how they planned to eliminate the Phantom Fleet operatives once their usefulness had ended. Vex stared at the crystal as if it might explode. How did you obtain this information? Trade secret, Maya said with a wink. But I will say this, humans have a talent for being underestimated. While everyone was focused on the big, obvious threats, I was having friendly conversations with maintenance workers, bartenders, and cargo handlers. You'd be amazed what people will tell you when they think you're just another harmless human tourist. And the Hive Queen's scouts. Maya's expression grew more serious. Now that was trickier. Hive scouts are good at their jobs, but they have one weakness: they're programmed to gather information above all else. Once I figured out they were there, I made sure they gathered very specific information. What kind of information? The kind that made it very clear that the syndicate operation was doomed to failure and that any Hive involvement would result in severe consequences for the Queen's territories. Vex was beginning to understand why Maya hadn't needed to take notes. She hadn't been attending a debrief. She'd been orchestrating the entire situation from the beginning. "Captain," he said slowly, "exactly how long have you known about the syndicate's plans?" Maya's smile was enigmatic. "Commander, I've been tracking syndicate activity for the better part of 2 years. Omega-7 wasn't their first attempt at a comeback, it was just their most ambitious one." 2 years? Cora's voice was barely a whisper. "Humans don't forget easily," Maya said. "The syndicate killed a lot of good people during their first reign of terror. When we heard rumors they might be regrouping, well, let's just say we decided to take a proactive approach to the problem." Vex felt a chill run down his carapace. "We?" "Oh, did I not mention that part?" Maya's tone was innocent, but her eyes held a glint that made Vex's survival instincts scream warnings. "Captain Maya Torres, Terran Intelligence Division, Special Operations Branch. Pleased to make your official acquaintance, Commander." The revelation hit like a meteor strike. Terran intelligence was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most effective and ruthless intelligence organizations in existence. They were also notoriously secretive, with operatives who could disappear into any society seamlessly. "You're a spook," Vex said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "I prefer intelligence professional, but sure, let's go with spook," Maya said. "And before you ask, yes, everything I've told you is true. The syndicate operation has been completely neutralized, all hostile operatives have been identified and contained, and the diplomatic meetings concluded successfully because I made sure they had accurate information instead of syndicate propaganda." "Contained?" Cora asked weakly. "Contained," Maya confirmed, though I should mention that several of them requested asylum rather than face syndicate justice for their failure. Apparently, the syndicate doesn't handle disappointment well. Vex rubbed his temples with 2 of his hands. "Captain Torres, you've just described preventing what could have been the largest intelligence disaster in galactic history. Why didn't you report this through proper channels?" Maya leaned forward, her expression growing serious for the first time since the debrief began. "Because, Commander, the syndicate infiltration went deeper than just Omega-7. We had to be very careful about who we trusted with operational intelligence." "How deep?" Vex asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. "Deep enough that 3 of the species' representatives at those diplomatic meetings were actually syndicate assets," Maya said quietly. "Deep enough that the station commander himself was compromised. Deep enough that if we'd gone through normal channels, the entire operation would have been blown before we could act. The implications were staggering. If the syndicate had successfully infiltrated galactic diplomatic and military structures to that extent, the resulting war would have torn apart the fragile peace that had existed for decades." "So what happens now?" Cora asked. Maya stood up, smoothing down her uniform. "Now, Lieutenant, you and the commander get to write some very interesting reports. I've already transmitted complete intelligence packages to the appropriate authorities in each affected government. The cleanup crews are already at work. And I suspect there are going to be some very uncomfortable conversations in several capital cities over the next few days." She moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at Vex. "Oh, and Commander, next time you're debriefing a Terran intelligence operative, you might want to check their credentials first. Would have saved us all some time." Captain Vex called out as she reached the door. "One more question." Maya turned, raising an eyebrow. "Did you really prevent a war, or did you start one?" Maya's smile was sharp as a blade. "Commander, sometimes the best way to prevent a war is to make sure the right people know exactly what the consequences of starting one would be." The Syndicate learned a valuable lesson about underestimating human intelligence capabilities, as did several other interested parties. With that, she was gone, leaving Vex and Cora alone with a data crystal that contained enough explosive information to reshape galactic politics. The uncomfortable realization that they had severely underestimated both the human sitting across from them and the species she represented. Vex picked up the data crystal with trembling fingers. "Cora, get me a secure connection to Galactic Command. Priority Alpha." "Yes, sir," Cora replied, already moving toward the communications panel. "Sir, what do I tell them this is regarding?" Vex looked at the crystal, then at the door through which Maya Torres had disappeared. "Tell them we need to discuss revising our threat assessment protocols for human intelligence operations." "And Cora?" "Yes, sir." "Schedule a meeting with the diplomatic corps. I have a feeling we're going to need to have some very serious conversations about exactly how many other Maya Torres are out there and what they might be up to." As Cora began establishing the connection, Vex couldn't shake the feeling that this debrief had been less about gathering information and more about Maya Torres delivering a message. Humans were far more dangerous than anyone had realized, and they had been paying attention to everything. 3 hours later, Vex wished he had never heard the name Maya Torres. His office had become a war room, with holographic displays showing intelligence reports streaming in from across the galaxy. Every few minutes, another bombshell landed that made his previous headache feel like a gentle message. "Sir," Cora announced, her voice strained, "Admiral Grex from the Draconian Fleet wants to speak with you. He says it's about Operation Starfall." Vex's primary eye widened. Operation Starfall had been a classified Draconian military exercise from 6 months ago. How could that possibly relate to Maya Torres? "Put him through," Vex said, steeling himself for whatever fresh nightmare awaited. The hologram of Admiral Grex materialized, his scaled features twisted in what Vex had learned to recognize as barely controlled fury. "Commander Vex, I understand you've been debriefing a human operative named Torres." "That's correct, Admiral, though I'm not sure why that would concern Draconian military operations." Grex's laugh was harsh as grinding metal. "Because, Commander, your Maya Torres was the systems analyst who identified critical vulnerabilities in our defense grid during Starfall. We thought she was just an exceptionally thorough consultant." The room seemed to spin around Vex. "Consultant?" "She submitted a 40-page report on potential weaknesses in our orbital defense platforms. We were so impressed that we implemented every single one of her recommendations." Grex's expression grew darker. "Recommendations that coincidentally created perfect blind spots for infiltrating our most secure facilities." Cora dropped her datapad again. It was becoming a habit. "Admiral," Vex said carefully, "are you saying she sabotaged your defenses?" "No," Grex replied, and his tone made Vex's antennae twitch nervously. "I'm saying she improved them while simultaneously mapping every possible entry point, security protocol, and response procedure in our entire fleet. When my intelligence staff ran the analysis, they determined she could single-handedly penetrate any installation in Draconian space. But why would she do that?" Another harsh laugh from Grex. "Because 3 weeks after Starfall concluded, we intercepted Syndicate communications planning an assault on our primary shipyards. They had detailed intelligence about our defenses, patrol schedules, and response protocols. Intelligence that could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of our systems." Vex felt his headache intensifying. The Syndicate had inside information. He had being the operative term, Grex confirmed. When they tried to execute their plan, they discovered that every piece of intelligence they'd obtained was deliberately flawed. Their assault force flew directly into what they thought were blind spots, only to find concentrated defensive positions waiting for them. She fed them false information. Worse than that, Commander, she used our own security improvements to create a trap. The Syndicate lost their entire strike force, and we captured enough intelligence to roll up their entire network in 3 sectors. Vex stared at the Admiral's image, trying to process what he was hearing. Admiral, with respect, this sounds like the actions of someone working to protect draconian interests. Exactly, Grex said grimly, and that terrifies me more than if she'd been working against us. Because it means humans have been manipulating galactic politics on a scale we never imagined, and we never even noticed. The connection ended, leaving Vex alone with his thoughts and a growing sense that he was looking at the tip of a very large iceberg. "Sir?" Cora ventured. "There's more." "More what?" "More calls. The crystalline hegemony wants to discuss their mining operation security reviews from last year. The Voidwalkers are asking about their navigation consultant." And she paused, checking her list. "The Zephyrian High Command wants to know why their most successful counterintelligence operation was planned by a human academic." Vex closed all three eyes and counted to 10 in ancient Zephyrian. When he opened them, Cora was still there, still holding a list that seemed to grow longer as he watched. "How many?" he asked. "So far, 14 different species or governments have reported interactions with human consultants, analysts or academics in the past 2 years. All of them involving critical security or military systems." The intercom chimed, interrupting Vex's attempt to maintain his sanity. "Commander," came the voice of his communications officer, "I have Director Sarah Mitchell from Terran Intelligence on Priority Channel. She says it's time for the follow-up conversation." Vex looked at Cora, who shrugged helplessly. "Put her through." The hologram that appeared was not what Vex had expected. Director Mitchell was an older human woman with silver hair and the kind of smile that suggested she knew secrets that could topple governments. Which Vex was beginning to suspect she probably did. "Commander Vex," she said pleasantly, "I hope Captain Torres didn't cause you too much trouble during her debrief." "Director," Vex said, trying to keep his voice level, "I'm beginning to understand that Captain Torres' activities at Omega-7 were part of a much larger operation." "Oh, Commander," Mitchell said with that same terrifying smile, "Omega-7 wasn't an operation. It was a graduation exercise." The silence that followed was so profound that Vex could hear his own heart's beating. "Graduation exercise?" Cora whispered. "Captain Torres is one of our newest field operatives," Mitchell explained casually. "We've been training her for 2 years, and the syndicate situation provided an excellent opportunity to test her skills in a real-world scenario." Vex felt something snap inside his mind. "You're telling me that preventing a galactic war was a training exercise?" "Well, the war prevention was a happy side effect," Mitchell said. "The real objective was to see if Torres could successfully coordinate a multi-species intelligence operation while maintaining her cover identity. She exceeded expectations. Multi-species intelligence operation." Vex repeated numbly. "Oh yes, the Phantom Fleet commander she convinced to switch sides. He's been one of our assets for 8 months. The Hive Queen's scouts, they've been feeding information to Terran intelligence since before Torres even arrived at Omega-7. Even some of the syndicate operatives were actually our people, feeding their organization false intelligence." Cora made a sound that might have been a whimper. "Director," Vex said slowly, "exactly how extensive is Terran Intelligence's network?" Mitchell's smile widened. "Commander, do you really think humans would venture into a galaxy full of advanced alien civilizations without doing our homework first?" "Your homework?" "For the past 50 years, ever since first contact, we've been very carefully building relationships, studying cultures and, yes, placing assets throughout galactic civilization. Not to control or conquer, mind you, simply to ensure that humanity's interests are protected and that conflicts like the syndicate situation can be managed before they spiral out of control." Vex's mind reeled. 50 years? Humans plan for the long term, Commander. We learned early on that, in a galaxy this dangerous, the species that survive are the ones that see trouble coming and take steps to prevent it. "But the other species," Cora protested, "they don't know." "Oh, some of them do," Mitchell said. "The smarter ones have figured out that those helpful human consultants and advisors might be more than they appear." but most prefer not to ask too many questions because the advice is genuinely helpful and the results speak for themselves. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared showing incident reports from across the galaxy. Pirate attacks down 60% in systems with human advisors. Diplomatic conflicts resolved before escalation in 78% of cases involving human mediators. Trade disputes settled amicably when human economists provide analysis. "You're managing galactic civilization," Vex said, and it wasn't a question. "We're participating in galactic civilization," Mitchell corrected. "Humans have always been good at building coalitions and finding common ground. We just apply those skills on a slightly larger scale than most species expect. And if other species object to this participation..." Mitchell's expression grew more serious. "Commander, in the past 5 decades, how many major wars has the galaxy seen?" Vex thought about it. "None. There have been minor conflicts, but nothing on the scale of the previous century." "Exactly. Before humans arrived, galactic history was a series of devastating wars between species and empires. Since we've been here, conflicts get resolved through negotiation, economic pressure, or carefully targeted intelligence operations that eliminate threats before they can grow." "The Syndicate wasn't the first, was it?" Cora asked. "The Syndicate was the 14th major criminal or terrorist organization we've dismantled in the past 20 years, Mitchell confirmed. Most of them were eliminated so quietly that their own members thought they'd disbanded due to internal conflicts." Vex slumped in his chair. "Director, why are you telling us this?" "Because, Commander, your species has always been one of our most trusted partners. Zephyrians have excellent analytical minds and a strong sense of justice. We'd like to formalize our relationship." "Formalize how?" "We're establishing a new intelligence-sharing consortium. Species that join get access to our intelligence networks, early warning about potential threats, and assistance with their own security concerns. In exchange, they provide their own expertise and resources to help maintain galactic stability." Vex looked at Cora, who was frantically taking notes. "And if we decline?" Mitchell shrugged. "Then you decline. We're not in the business of forcing cooperation, Commander. But I will point out that the species currently in our consortium have seen significant improvements in their security, economic stability, and diplomatic standing." "Who else is already in this consortium?" "I can't give you a complete list, but I will say that the Draconians joined last month, right after Admiral Grex realized what Torres had accomplished during Operation Starfall." Vex's headache was reaching legendary proportions. "Director, I need to consult with my superiors." "Of course. Take all the time you need, Commander. Though I should mention that we're expecting some interesting developments in the Outer Rim over the next few months. Pirates have been getting unusually well organized lately, and our analysis suggests someone is backing them with significant resources. Someone like the Syndicate. Someone with similar goals but better funding and more patience," Mitchell said ominously. "The kind of threat that requires coordinated intelligence efforts to address effectively." The hologram flickered, and Mitchell's voice took on a more casual tone. "Oh, and Commander, you might want to review your files on human cultural attaches, trade representatives, and academic exchange students from the past few years. I think you'll find some interesting patterns." With that cheerful bombshell, the connection ended, leaving Vex staring at empty air and contemplating the possibility that his entire understanding of galactic politics had just been turned upside down. "Cora," he said finally, "get me the files on every human who's had any official contact with Zephyrian institutions in the past 5 years." "All of them, sir." "All of them. And Cora, start with the ones who provided the most helpful advice." As Cora hurried out to begin what Vex suspected would be a very disturbing research project, he picked up the data crystal Maya Torres had left behind. Such a small thing to contain information that could reshape how his species viewed their place in the galaxy. He activated his personal communication system and sent a priority message to Zephyrian High Command. Request immediate consultation regarding proposed intelligence sharing agreement with Terran government. Situation more complex than initially assessed. Full briefing required. Then he sat back in his chair and tried to decide whether he was more impressed or terrified by the realization that humans had been quietly managing galactic affairs for decades without anyone noticing. 3 hours later, when High Command's response arrived authorizing full cooperation with the Terran Intelligence Consortium, Vex wasn't entirely surprised. After all, if humans had been successfully preventing galactic wars for 50 years, opposing them now seemed like a spectacularly bad idea. But as he prepared his official report on the Torres debrief, one thought kept nagging at him: if this was what human intelligence was willing to reveal about their operations, what weren't they telling him? In the end, Vex decided he was probably better off not knowing. Some secrets were meant to stay buried, especially when those secrets were keeping the galaxy peaceful. Besides, he had a feeling that Maya Torres and her colleagues would make sure he learned anything he really needed to know, whether he wanted to or not. After all, that seemed to be what humans did best: make sure everyone had exactly the information they needed, exactly when they needed it. Even if they never realized where that information was really coming from.